All right, Pete. We really got to talk about this. I think that this to me is obviously player hater. It just
The
reminds me of that.
definition of
It reminds me of the Dave Chappelle skit of the haters ball. Many moons
yeah,
ago,
when
if you
keeping
watched
it
it,
real goes wrong.
probably one of the biggest haters in the game. Here's what we'll say about this. I think obviously, I think both of us. I should ask you: are you in agreement with what Gilbert said?
I mean, I couldn't be any farther away from agreement with Gilbert Arenas. I think this is one of the ultimate clown takes. I think at this point, I'm going to keep my answer to this pretty straight and simple. I think at this point, if you're doubting Giannis, I don't really think you watch him play basketball. I really don't. What kind of critique does that make sense for somebody who never won a championship, first of all? I mean, that's just the simplest part of the equation right there. Gilbert never sniffed the championship in his entire career, and he is telling a guy who carried a team to a championship in one of the hardest seasons to ever do it, the season coming out of the coronavirus pandemic, right? Even in the middle
Mm-hmm.
of it still, and he
Yeah.
carried his team. And realistically, Bernie, I think both of us agree with this to a certain extent too. They probably could have made it to the finals had Chris Middleton been healthy this last season. I know that hurts you as a Celtics fan, but I mean it was very close without Middleton.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, I think they would have beat the Warriors if they had made it to the finals healthy. But that didn't happen, so you can't really equate it. Even then, it still doesn't matter. It's just a wild take. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I just think like when you look at what he said about Giannis, I think what comes to me is let's look at the rest of his peers in this league. Again, this was probably one of the first years in his career. Again, we look at the careers before that, 30 minutes a game, 33 minutes a game. In today's game, you look at these players and look at what their minutes are averaging, it's about 35. I mean, we look at Luka Doncic, 35 is what he played last year, 34 the year previous.
Mm-hmm.
We look at Kevin Durant. The I would kind of compare it to the Golden State Warriors championship years. If we look at it, even his Oklahoma City days in his prime. We got at 26 years old, 33.8. I know he only played 27 games, but then he goes to the championship years in Golden State. 35, 33, 34. And then Jason Tatum, same thing. I'm not sure why these ads are appearing everywhere, but again, these are not sponsored by the Charge, so that's a little frustrating. But again, 35, around 35 to 36 minutes. Again, when I look at these stats and then I look at what Gilbert Arenas said about Giannis, it makes no sense to me. I think that this is one of those things where the news media was slow. They had to talk about a story, and the story again is attacking Giannis. For some reason, I feel like Gilbert does not like Giannis. Um,
Yeah, he obviously doesn't.
it kind of gives me some undertones about Giannis being an international player. I'm not necessarily liking the international guys. That's kind of what I get the vibe of from a guy like Gilbert. Again, I think Giannis again is he the guy that's going to do everything and everything? I mean, let's look at this, Pete. Think back to when people thought that Shaquille O'Neal was the best player in the league. Shaquille
Yeah.
O'Neal was not averaging as many assists as Giannis was. And Gilbert
No.
talks about the IQ of the game and things like that. Like, look, Giannis
Mm-hmm.
is not necessarily going to do. He's not the all end all be all. He's not a small forward. He's more of a power forward center type of build, more of like that kind of inside presence. And so to me, to compare him and say like, oh, he's got to do this, this, and this to be considered great, I just find it laughable, man.
I mean, it's almost too far to even be laughable. Like it's more of just like, what are you? Why do you even have a platform to talk about this type of thing? Like if this is what you're gonna do and waste people's time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but to say that Giannis, like, if there's any criticism of Giannis's game, it's one place and it's his 3-point shooting at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's literally the only borderline fair criticism. He is the most well-rounded player in the league, not named LeBron James, in my opinion, right now
Mm-hmm.
in the
Yeah.
NBA. And even then, LeBron isn't the number two best player in the league right now. Spoiler for our lists in a little bit, but that's because LeBron is 40, right? Giannis is
Mm-hmm.
in the prime of his career. He's a freak athlete. And even the implication that he doesn't do what it takes to win it's asinine. It's just
Mm-hmm.
craziness. Because, like, this is a dude, and this is where, like, the getting on top of him about his basketball IQ really gets me, right? Because I know you and I were deep in the trenches in the 2021 or the 2020 NBA playoffs, excuse me. Or no. It was the 2021. It was the year that the Bucks won, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Giannis did one thing that only the greatest of great players in the NBA in NBA history
Mm-hmm.
have ever done, and that is make adjustments on like a complete fundamental level in the middle of a series
Mm-hmm.
and change the fortunes of his entire team. And not only that, he did it like 3 times. He did it in each of the final 3 series of the playoffs leading up to them winning the championship. He was adjusting and finding out what was working for him in particular and what his team needed to do at every point of those playoffs. And as a
Mm-hmm.
result, they ended up winning because he was their best player. It I I mean, I'm going to be a little rude to Gilbert here. He couldn't even sniff Giannis's jock strap in his best days. Like he couldn't. I'm
Ouch.
sorry. Gilbert was nasty in the beginning of his career. He was a legit all-star, but even then, there was no universe where Gilbert Arenas was ever leading a team to a conference championship. He was not that good. So to be this dude now and talk this, crazy talk about guys who are actually great, like Giannis is a top 25 player of all time, probably already, in my opinion. I
Right.
think he's probably like number 25 if he's on that list.
Mm-hmm.
But I, he's top 25 already, and he's 27 or 28. Like, what are you talking about? This is just old heads criticizing the current generation of players just to criticize. Because
Right.
Giannis is, I would argue, one of the very few players in the NBA right now that, without a doubt, you could put him in any generation and he would thrive. Any generation,
Yeah.
Giannis is a generational player. There are not many players like that at any point in the NBA,
Mm-hmm.
and Giannis is one of those dudes.
Yeah. I mean, this to me just gives me the vibes of a Skip Bayless, but in the reverse, right? This is like for Gilbert Arenas, it's Gilbert Giannis is equivalent to LeBron James for Skip Bayless. I mean, it just continues to talk about him, continues to create narratives about Giannis, about how he plays, his IQ. Does he really understand the game of basketball? Here's one thing that European teams will do a lot better than I believe anywhere in the world, and that is to teach these young guys the fundamentals of more so the IQ of how to play the game, knowing when you drive baseline to have the 45 guy cut, when to drive middle. That's when the baseline guy or the guy in the corner cuts to the basket. I mean, to me, European basketball does a great job of teaching those kids instinctually how to play the game. And to say that Giannis doesn't have the IQ, or to say that Giannis is not at the level of where he needs to be like the one of the top guys in the league. It's preposterous, and this is what disappointed me about Phil Handy being on that show. Again, I respect Phil Handy. I think he does a lot of great work in the community. Does a lot of great work for the game to kind of continue to cultivate it for the next generation coming up with his training and methods and everything like that. But I just think that by saying Giannis isn't that guy, it is a little frustrating because I like the guy, but I don't think that he's right. And again, maybe some guys, maybe with a lot of people saying that Giannis is the next dude, it gets people salty or gets people the wrong way. It's probably how Michael Jordan fans felt when they said that LeBron James was one of the best players of all time, or like is going to surpass Michael Jordan in some sense. That's where I feel
Sure.
like this is coming from. And so again, I think at the end of the day, when I look at it and when I see that we have probably the biggest haters of all time talking about it, um, I just think that it's for me. It's a tired narrative. I think Giannis is a very smart player, and then even like think about this in the playoffs. So we look at his playoff stats for Giannis. The dude in the last couple years, the year that he won the ring, and the next year after that, he's averaging 38 to 37 minutes per game, respectively, in those 2 seasons.
Efficiently
And it's just
on
kind of like,
winning teams.
yeah,
Like anything you could say is great.
yeah,
Anything you could point to.
yeah, exactly. And so,
He's the best defender in the league.
yeah,
Like the list goes on. You don't be the best player defensively in the entire NBA
mm-hmm,
and be probably the best offensive player in the league too. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't think he's the best offensive player in the league. Let me make that clear. I think there's a couple guys who are a little bit more well-rounded offensively, but he's such a freak that he still ends up being probably the best offensive, weapon in the
Yeah.
league anyway. That's the difference. That's the difference. Like,
Hmm.
you can get on this guy for IQ all you want, but it doesn't make a difference when you're the number one guy in the league or two or three, regardless.
Hmm.
It's so wild. It's so wild. It's really crazy to me. Like, because one of the things too is like, Phil Handy, anything they said could and should have been directed towards Anthony Davis. Like any of the criticisms
Hmm.
they had, all should have been pointed towards Anthony Davis. The funny part is that they feel that they can say it towards Giannis because he's an international player, because he's whatever it is, right? They're
Just
not
different.
involved with him directly on the coach.
Yeah.
He's different than them. It's exactly it, man. He's different. The difference is AD, you can't criticize him because Phil Handy's a coach of the Lakers, right? And you don't want to get him sensitive about his issues. But all of those things were
Hmm.
much more accurately directed at Anthony Davis because you would say any of those things are true about him. You would hope more from him. He is better than he has been for years
Yeah.
now. And the question is, does he put the work in physically to stay healthy? Does he put the whatever it is to stay on the court? Does Anthony Davis do those things? We don't
Hmm.
know. We don't know that, but we're going to criticize the best player in the league probably 4 or 5 years running now. And here's my last thing because I don't think we should waste any more time on Gilbert Arenas, right? Kobe Bryant, the late great Kobe Bean Bryant, okay, challenged Giannis as a young man. Like Giannis had
Hmm.
never even sniffed an MVP conversation.
Yeah.
And Kobe Bryant went out of his way and challenged him to be as great as Kobe thought he could be as a
Hmm.
young player. And he said, go win an MVP. And what did Giannis do? He literally went and won an MVP that season. That challenge happened, right?
Hmm.
Players like Kobe is the ultimate earned respect given type of player in the NBA, right? Probably in NBA
Hmm.
history. He's one of like those guys, right?
Yeah.
And he reached out and saw that in Giannis, and I would just say, you're Gilbert Arenas. What are you even talking about?
Hmm.
No, just stop. You're not Skip Bayless. You're not any of these people, and even then, those dudes are tired and outdated. Nobody wants to listen to Skip Bayless, so don't just go out and try and be that if that's not. It's one of two things. You're either trying to be that guy or you're that just bad of a basketball opinion haver.
Hmm.
It's one or both.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think the final thing that I'll say to it too is just I think that we talk about how there's been unfair and just criticism to LeBron James all these years, and the fact that again we don't want to create another situation, and maybe the Durant stuff is another video in itself to talk about as like a criticism in the media. But to me, I think Gilbert, I just do not like. I just feel like the take was a bad look. Again, it comes off as someone who is salty. It comes off as someone who probably wished that he had that innate ability or that size or that length or that strength just to do just an iota of what Giannis did. And again, I will never be an NBA player. That I think I've admitted that since I was probably 13 or 14 years old when I was a kid. I will never be an NBA player. But one thing I will not understand, or one thing maybe that's the reason why I won't ever understand maybe Gilbert's kind of jealousy. But at the same time, you cannot be hating on someone who is just trying, or not even trying, but he is one of the best players to ever, one of
Easy.
the top 75. And so for me, it's just kind of one of those things where you cannot hate on someone who's in the top 75. Someone again, not we're not trying to justify that he is the perfect player, right? Because obviously everybody has flaws. No one is a perfect player. But to say that like Giannis, after winning a championship, after winning an MVP, after leading, I believe he led the league in scoring once. I think I could be wrong on that. Fact check me if I'm wrong on that. We can't be sitting here saying that Giannis is doesn't have the IQ. I will not respect that opinion because I think that's just the dumbest opinion to have about Giannis. Again, this is a team sport. It's 5 on 5. It's not 1 on 1, it's not 2 on 2, it's 5v5. Giannis and Mike Budenholzer, who I think Jason Kidd might have coached him a couple years, but for the most part, it's been Mike Budenholzer who's kind of molded him to that championship form. And so to me, like, we can't be sitting here saying that it's the IQ is the reason. Again, it's up to the coach how he wants to play his players and the style that he plays. There's a reason why the Warriors play a certain style. There's a reason why all these players play a certain style. It's because it's the way that the coaches want it directed, right? I think when we think about like the LeBron James Lakers, they're directed in a certain style as well. Where for the most part, LeBron James will bring the ball up and down the court, will create the plays for everybody. Hopefully it'll change this next year. That's my hope. But at the same time, thinking about it this way, Giannis has a certain role in the team that I think a lot of people they just need to respect that. And I just don't think that for a guy like Gilbert, who is, again, old school, like you said, and is going to be in this situation where he's like, oh, it's, if Allen Iverson played 40 minutes a game, LeBron played 37, 38. This is a new NBA. And I think that's what these old heads need to realize when it comes to the game of the basketball.
Well, and also, I looked it up real quick. Gilbert Arenas actually, I don't believe he ever led the league in scoring. He was third place in 2006, 2007 behind Kobe and Carmelo. It was a 28.7 points per game season. Nice, right? Problem is that they only went 41 and 41. So even in your best year, Gilbert Arenas, you still were only 500. I think that's important to note,
Yeah.
There's a level of criticism. It's kind of like, I feel like we see this all the time nowadays, and I don't want to get back into the rabbit hole, man, but there's a lot of Gilbert Arenases, a lot of Dan Orlovsky's, a lot of these guys who just like were backups or not even like better than that, right? The people who were
Yeah.
Gilbert Arenas, like he's an all NBA player probably two to three times, right? It just doesn't matter, man. You don't have the right to sit out here and go criticize Giannis and Tom Brady and LeBron and all these people. And like,
Mm-hmm.
these guys are human too. They have little issues, but nitpicking them, I mean, it's crazy, man. The nitpicking that goes on nowadays is just off the charts.
Yeah, exactly. And let us know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think of this Giannis Gilbert Arenas story? Is it a big deal? Is it no big deal? And if you were Giannis, do you respond? Do you not respond? And, just let us know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think of this story talking about Giannis and Gilbert, the story and the love saga that continues between those two. Let us know in the comment section down below. And remember to like, share, and subscribe this video and this live stream while you're at it.